Short Stories by O. Henry. 2. The Trimmed Lamp. Of course, there are two sides of the question. Let us look at the other. We often hear shop girls spoken of. No such person exists. There are girls who work in shops. They make their living that way. But why turn their occupation into an adjective? Let us be fair. We do not refer to the girls who live on Fifth Avenue as marriage girls. Lou and Nancy were chums. They came to the big city to find work because there was not enough to eat at their homes to go around. Nancy was 19 and Lou was 20. Both were pretty, active country girls who had no ambition to go on the stage. The little cherub that sits up aloft, guiding them to a cheap and respectable boarding house, both found positions and became wage earners. They remain chums. It is at the end of 6 months that I would beg you to step forward and to be introduced to them. Meddlesome reader, my lady friends, Miss Nancy and Miss Lou. While you are shaking hands, please take notice cautiously of their attire. Yes, cautiously, for they are as quick to resent a stare as a lady in a box at the horse show is. Lou is a piecework ironer in a laundry. She is clothed in a badly fitting purple dress, and her hat plume is 4 inches too long, but her ermine muff and scarf cost $25. Its fellow beasts will be ticketed at the window at $7.98 before the season is over. Her cheeks are pink, and her light blue eyes bright. Contentment radiates from her. Nancy you would call a shop girl because you have the habit. There is no type, but a perverse generation is always seeking a type. So this is what the type should be. She has the high-rated pompadour and the exaggerated straight front. Her skirt is shoddy, but has the correct flare. No furs protect her against the bitter spring air, but she wears her short broadcloth jacket as jauntily as though it were a Parisian lamb. On her face and in her eyes, remorseless type-seeker, is the typical shop-girl expression. It is a look of silent but contemptuous revolt against cheated womanhood, of sad prophecy of the vengeance to come. When she laughs, her loudest, the look is still there. The same look can be seen in the eye of Russian peasants, and those of us left will see it some day on Gabriel's face when he comes to blow us up. It is a look that should wither and abash man, but he has been known to smirk at it and offer flowers with a string tied to them. Now lift your hat and come away while you receive Lou's cheery "See you again," and the sardonic, sweet smile of Nancy that seems somehow to miss you and go fluttering like a white moth up over the housetops to the stars. The two waited on the corner for Dan. Dan was Lou's steady company. Faithful? Well, he was on hand when Mary would have had to hire a dozen subpoenaing servers to find her lamb. "Ain't you cold, Nancy?" asked Lou. "Say, what a chump you are for working in that old store for $8 a week. I made $18.50 last week. Of course, ironing isn't as swell work as selling lace behind a counter, but it pays. None of us ironers make less than $10, and I don't know that it's any less respectable work either." "You can have it," said Nancy with uplifted nose. "I'll take my $8 a week and hall bedroom. I like to be among nice things and swell people. And look what a chance I've got. Why, one of our glove girls married a Pittsburgh, a steel maker, or a blacksmith, or something. Anyway, the other day, worth $1 million. I'll catch a swell myself sometime. I ain't bragging on my looks or anything, but I'll take my chances where there's big prizes offered." "What show would a girl have in a laundry?" "Why, that's where I met Dan," said Lou triumphantly. "He came in for his Sunday shirt and collars and saw me at the first board ironing. We all try to get to work at the first board. Ella McGinnis was sick that day, and I had her place. Some nice fellows come into the laundries. You can tell 'em by their bringing their clothes in suitcases and turning in the door sharp and sudden. "How can you wear a waist like that, Lou?" asked Nancy, gazing down at the offending article with sweet scorn in her heavy-lidded eyes. "It shows fierce taste." "This waist?" said Lou with wide-eyed indignation. "Why, I paid $16 for this waist. It's worth $25. A woman left it to be laundered and never called for it. The boss sold it to me. It's got yards and yards of hand embroidery on it. Better talk about that ugly plain thing you've got on." "This ugly plain thing," said Nancy calmly, "was copied from one that Mrs. Van Alstyne Fisher was wearing. The girls say her bill in the store last year was $12,000. I made mine myself. It cost me $1.50. 10 feet away you couldn't tell it from hers." "Oh, well," said Lou, good-naturedly, "if you want to starve and put on airs, go ahead. But I'll take my job and good wages, and after hours give me something as fancy and attractive to wear as I'm able to buy." But just then Dan came, a serious young man with a ready-made necktie, who had escaped the city's brand of frivolity, an electrician earning $30 per week, who looked upon Lou with the sad eyes of Romeo. "My friend, Mr. Owen, shake hands with Miss Danforth," said Lou. "I'm mighty glad to know you, Miss Danforth," said Dan, with outstretched hand. "I've heard Lou speak of you so often." "Thanks," said Nancy, touching his fingers with the tips of her cool ones. "I've heard her mention you a few times." Lou giggled. "Did you get that handshake, Mr. Van Alstyne Fisher?" "Did you get that handshake from Mrs. Van Alstyne Fisher, Nance?" she asked. "If I did, you can feel safe in copying it," said Nancy. "Oh, I couldn't use it at all. It's too stylish for me. It's intended to set off diamond rings, that high shake is. Wait till I get a few, and then I'll try it." "Learn it first," said Nancy wisely, "and you'll be more likely to get the rings." "Now, to settle this argument," said Dan, "let me make you a proposition. As I can't take both of you up to Tiffany's and do the right thing, what do you say to a little vaudeville? I've got the tickets. How about looking at stage diamonds, since we can't shake hands with the real sparklers?" The faithful squire took his place close to the curb. Lou next, a little peacocky in her bright and pretty clothes, and Nancy on the inside, slender and soberly clothed as a sparrow, but with the true Van Alstyne Fisher walk. Thus they set out for their evening's moderate diversion. I do not suppose that many look upon a great department store as an educational institution, but the one in which Nancy worked was something like that to her. She was surrounded by beautiful things, and breathed a taste of refinement. If you live in the atmosphere of luxury, luxury is yours, whether your money pays for it or others. The people she served were mostly women whose dress, manners, and position in the social world were quoted as criterions. From them Nancy began to take toll, the best from each according to her view. From one she would copy a practice or a gesture, from another an eloquent lifting of an eyebrow, from others a manner of walking or carrying a purse, or of a smile, of greeting a friend and addressing inferiors in situations. From her best beloved model, Miss Van Alstyne Fisher, she made requisition for that excellent thing, a soft, low voice as clear as silver, and as perfect in articulation as the notes of a thrush. Stuff used in the aura of this high social refinement and good breeding, it was impossible for her to escape a deeper effect of it. As good habits are said to be better than good principles, so, perhaps, good manners are better than good habits. The teaching of your parents may not keep alive your New England conscience, but if you sit on a straight-backed chair and repeat the words prisms and pilgrims 40 times, the devil will flee from you. And when Nancy spoke in the Van Alstyne Fisher tones, she felt the thrill of noblesse oblige in her very bones. There was another source of learning in the great department school. Whenever you see 3 or 4 shop girls gathered in a bunch and jingle their wire bracelets as an accompaniment to apparently frivolous conversations, do not think that they are there for the purpose of criticizing the way Ethel does her back hair. The meeting may lack the dignity of men, but it has all the importance of occasion on which Eve and her first daughter first put their heads together to make Adam understand his proper place in the household. It is women's conference for common defense and exchange of strategical theories of attack and repulse upon the and against the world, which is a stage, and man, its audience, who persists in throwing bouquets thereupon. Women, the most helpless of the young of any animal, with the fawn's grace but without its fleetness, and with the bird's beauty but without its power of flight, with the honey-bee's burden of sweetness but without its, oh, let's drop that simile. Some of us have been stung. During this council of war they pass weapons one to another and exchange stratagems that each has devised and formulated out of the tactics of life. I says to him, says Sadie, ain't you the fresh thing? Who do you suppose I am, to be addressing such a remark to me? And what do you think he says back to me? The heads, brown, black, flaxen, red, and yellow, bob together. The answer is given, and the parry to the thrust is decided upon, to be used by each thereafter in passage at arms with the common enemy man. Thus Nancy learned the art of defense, and to women successful defense means victory. The curriculum of a department store is a wide one. Perhaps no one college could have fitted her as well for her life's ambition, the drawing of a matrimonial prize. Her situation in the store was a favored one. The music room was near enough for her to hear and become familiar with the works of the best composers, at least to acquire the familiarity that passed for appreciation in the social world in which she was vaguely trying to set a tentative and aspiring foot. She absorbed the educating influence of art wares and of costly and dainty fabrics, of adornments that are almost culture to women. The other girls soon became aware of Nancy's ambition. "Here comes your millionaire, Nancy," they would call to her whenever any man who looked the role approached her counter. It got to be a habit of men who were hanging about while their women folks were shopping to stroll over to the handkerchief counter and to dawdle over the cambric squares. Nancy's imitation high-bred air and genuine dainty beauty was what attracted. Many men thus came to display their grace before her. Some of them may have been millionaires. Others were certainly no more than their assiduous ape. Nancy learned to discriminate. There was a widow at the end of the handkerchief counter, and she could see the rows of vehicles waiting for the shoppers in the street below. She looked and perceived that automobiles differ as well as do their owners. Once a fascinating gentleman brought 4 dozen handkerchiefs and wooed her across the counter with a King Cophetua air. When he had gone, one of the girls said, "What's wrong, Nance? That you didn't warm up to that fellow, did you? He looks the swell article all right to me." "Him?" said Nancy, with her coolest, sweetest, most impersonal Van Alstyne Fisher smile. "Not for mine. I saw him drive up outside. a 12 HP machine. And you saw what kind of handkerchiefs he bought, silk. And he's got Dactylus on him. Give me the real thing, or nothing, if you please. Two of the most refined women in the store, a forelady and a cashier, had a few swell gentlemen friends, with whom they now and then dined. Once they inclined Nancy to an invitation. The dinner took place in a spectacular cafe, whose tables are engaged for New Year's Eve a year in advance. There were two gentlemen friends, one without any hair on his head, high living ungruet. We can prove it. The other young man, whose worth and sophistication he impressed upon you in two convincing ways. He swore that all the wine was corked, and he wore diamond cuff buttons. This young man perceived irresistible excellence in Nancy. His taste ran to shop girls, and here was one that added the voice and manners of his high society to the franker charms of her own caste. So on the following day he appeared in the store and made her a serious proposal of marriage over a box of hem-stitched, grass-bleached Irish linens. Nancy declined. A brown pompadour 10 feet away had been using her eyes and ears. When the rejected suitor had gone, she heaped carboys of upbraidings and horror upon Nancy's head. "What a terrible little fool you are! That fellow's a millionaire. He's a nephew of old Van Skittles himself. And he was talking on the level to you. Have you gone crazy, Nance?" "Have I?" said Nancy. "I didn't take him, did I? He isn't a millionaire so hard that you could notice it, anyhow. His family only allows him 20,000 a year to spend. The bald-headed fellow was guying him about it the other night at supper." The brown pompadour came nearer and narrowed her eyes. "Say, what do you want?" she inquired in a voice hoarse for lack of chewing gum. "Ain't that enough for you? Do you want to marry a Rockefeller or a Gladstone or Dewey or the King of Spain and the whole bunch? Ain't 20,000 a year good enough for you?" Nancy flushed a little under the level gaze of the black, shallow eyes. "It wasn't altogether the money, Carrie," she explained. "His friend caught him in a rank lie the other night at dinner. It was about some girl he said he hadn't been to the theater with. Well, I can't stand a liar. Put everything together, I don't like him, and that settles it. When I sell out, it's not going to be for any bargain day. I've got to have something that sits up in chair like a man anyhow. Yes, I'm looking out for a catch. But it's got to be able to do something more than make a pose like a toy bank." "The sophisticated words you use," said the brown pompadour, walking away. These high ideas, if not ideals, Nancy continued to cultivate on $8 per week. She bivouacked on the trail of the great unknown catch, eating her dry bread and tightening her belt day by day. On her face was the faint, soldierly, sweet, grim smile of the preordained manhunter. The store was her forest, and many times she raised her rifle at game that seemed broad-antlered and big, but always some deep, unerring instinct, perhaps of the huntress, perhaps of the woman, made her hold her fire and take up the trail again. Lou flourished in the laundry. Out of her $18.50 per week, she paid $6 for her room and board. The rest went mainly for clothes. Her opportunities for bettering her taste and manners were few compared with Nancy's. In the steaming laundry there was nothing but work, and her thoughts of the evening pleasures to come. Many costly and showy fabrics passed under her iron, and it may be that her growing fondness for dress was thus transmitted to her through the conducting metal. When the day's work was over, Dan awaited her outside, her faithful shadow in whatever light she stood. Sometimes he cast an honest and troubled glance at Lou's clothes that increased in conspicuity rather than in style, but there was no disloyalty. He deprecated the attention they called to her in the streets, and Lou was no less faithful to her chum. There was a law that Nancy should go with them on whatever outing they might take, and Dan bore the extra burden heartily and in good cheer. It might be said that Lou furnished the color and Nancy the tone, and Dan the weight of the distraction-seeking trio. The escort, in his neat but obviously ready-made suit, his ready-made tie unfailing, genial, ready-made wit never startled or clashed. He was that good kind that you are likely to forget while they are present, but remember distinctly after they are gone. To Nancy's superior taste, the flavor of these ready-made pleasures was something of a little bitter. But she was young, and youth is a gourmand when it cannot be a gourmet. Dan is always wanting me to marry him right away, Lou told her once. But why should I? I'm independent. I can do as I please with the money I earn, and he never would agree for me to keep working after. And say, Nance, what do you want to stick to that old store for? Half starve yourself and half dress? I could get you a place in the laundry right now if you'd come. It seems to me that you could afford to be a little less stuck up if you could make a good deal more money. I don't think I'm stuck up, Lou, said Nancy, but I'd rather live on half rations and stay where I am. I suppose I've got the habit. It's the chance that I want. I don't expect to be always behind a counter, and I'm learning something new every day. I'm right up against refined and rich people all the time, even if I do only wait on them, and I'm not missing any pointers that I see passing round. Caught your millionaire yet? Asked Lou with her testing laugh. I haven't selected one yet, answered Nancy. I've been looking them all over. Goodness, the idea of picking over him. Don't you ever let one get by you, Nancy, even if he's a few dollars shy. But of course you're joking. Millionaires don't think about working girls like us. It might be better for them if they did, said Nancy with cool wisdom. Some of us could teach them how to take care of their money. If one was to speak to me, laughed Lou, I know I'd have a duck fit. That's because you don't know them. The only difference between swells and other people is you have to watch 'em closer. Don't you think the red silk lining is just a little bit too bright for that coat, Lou? Lou looked at the plain dull olive jacket of her friend. Well, no, I don't. But it may seem so beside that faded-looking thing you've got on. This jacket, said Nancy complacently, has exactly the cut and fit of one of Mrs. Van Alstyne Fisher was wearing the other day. The material cost me $3.98, and I suppose hers cost about $100 more. Oh, well, said Lou lightly, it don't strike me as a millionaire bait. Shouldn't wonder if I catch one before you do, anyway. Truly, it would have taken a philosopher to decide upon the value of the theories held by the two friends. Lou lacking that certain pride and fastidiousness that keeps stores and desks filled with girls working for keeps stores and desks filled with girls working for the barest living, thumped away gaily with the iron in the noisy and stifling laundry. Her wages supported her even beyond the point of comfort, so that her dress profited until sometimes she cast a sidelong glance of impatience at the neat but intelligent apparel of Dan. Dan, the constant and immutable, and the undeviating. As for Nancy, her case was one of tens of thousands, silks and jewels and laces and ornaments, and the perfume and music of the fine world of good breeding and taste. These were made for women. They are her equitable portion. Let her keep near them if they are a part of life to her, and if she will. She is no traitor to herself, as Issue was, for she keeps her birthright, and the pottage she earns is often very scant. In this atmosphere Nancy belonged, and she throve in it, and ate her frugal meals, and schemed over her cheap dresses with a determined and contented mind. She already knew women, and she was studying men, the animal, both as to his habit and eligibility. Some day she would bring down the game that she wanted, but she promised herself it would be what seemed to her the biggest and the best, and nothing smaller. Thus she kept her lamp trimmed and burning to receive the bridegroom when he stood and came. But another lesson she learned, perhaps unconsciously. Her standard of values began to shift and change. Sometimes the dollar mark grew blurred in her mind's eye, and shapes itself into the letters that spelled such words as truth and honor, and now and then just kindness. Let us make a likeness of one who hunts the moose or elk in some mighty wood. He sees a little dell, mossy and embowered, where a rill trickles, babbling to him the rest of the comfort. At these times the spear of Nimrod himself grows blunt. So Nancy wondered sometimes if Parisian lamb was always quoted at its market value by the hearts that it covered. One Thursday evening Nancy left the store and turned across 6th Avenue westward to the laundry. She was expected to go with Lou and Dan to a musical comedy. Dan was just coming out of the laundry when she arrived. There was an odd and strained look on his face. "I thought I would drop around to see if they had heard from her," he said. "Heard from who?" asked Nancy. "Isn't Lou there?" "I thought you knew," said Dan. "She hasn't been here or at the house where she lived since Monday. She moved all her things from there. She told one of the girls in the laundry she might be going to Europe." "Hasn't anybody seen her anywhere?" asked Nancy. Dan looked at her with his jaw set grimly, and a steely gleam in his steady gray eyes. "They told me in the laundry," he said harshly, "that they saw her pass yesterday in an automobile with one of those millionaires. I suppose that you and Lou were forever busying your brains about millionaires such as that." For the first time Nancy quailed before a man. She laid her hand that trembled slightly on Dan's sleeve. "You've no right to say such a thing to me, Dan. As if I had anything to do with it." "I didn't mean it that way," said Dan, softening. He fumbled in his vest pocket. "I've got the tickets for the show tonight," he said, with a gallant show of lightness. "If you—" Nancy admired pluck whenever she saw it. "I'll go with you, Dan," she said. 3 months went by before Nancy saw Lou again. At twilight one evening the shop girl was hurrying home along the border of a little quiet park. She heard her name called, and wheeled about in time to catch Lou rushing into her arms. After the first embrace they drew their heads back as serpents do, ready to attack or to charm, with 1,000 questions trembling on their swift tongues. And then Nancy noticed that prosperity had descended upon Lou, manifesting itself in costly furs, flashing gems, and creations of a tailor's art. "You little fool!" cried Lou loudly and affectionately. "I see you are still working in that store, and as shabby as ever. And how about that big catch you were going to make? Nothing doing yet, I suppose?" And then Lou looked and saw that something better than prosperity had descended upon Nancy, something that shone brighter than gems in her eyes and redder than a rose on her cheeks, and that danced like electricity, anxious to be loosed from the tip of her tongue. "Yes, I'm still in the store," said Nancy, "but I'm going to leave it next week. I've made my catch, and the biggest catch in the world. You won't mind now, Lou, will you? I'm going to be married to Dan." "To Dan?" He's my dad now." "Why, Lou?" Around the corner of the park strolled one of those new crop, smooth-faced young police officers that are making the force more endurable, at least to the eye. He saw the woman with the expensive fur coat and diamond ring crouched down against the iron fence of the park, sobbing turbulently, while a slender, plainly dressed working girl leaned close, trying to console her. But the Gibbsian cop, being of the new order, passed on, pretending not to notice, for he was wise enough to know that these matters are beyond help so far as the power he represents is concerned, though he rapped the pavement with the nightstick till the sound goes up to the furthermost stars. Makes the whole world kin. The burglar stepped inside the window quickly, and then he took his time. A burglar who respects his art always takes his time before taking anything else. The burglar lighted a cigarette. The guarded glow of the match illuminated his salient points for a moment. He belonged to the third type of burglars. This third type has not yet been recognized and accepted. The police have made us familiar with the first and second. Their classification is simple. The collar is the distinguishing mark. When a burglar is caught who does not wear a collar, he is described as a degenerate of the lowest type, singularly vicious and depraved, and is suspected of being the desperate criminal who stole the handcuffs out of Patrolman Hennessy's pocket in 1878 and walked away to escape arrest. The other well-known type is the burglar who wears a collar. He is always referred to as a Raffles in real life. He is invariably a gentleman by daylight and breakfasting in a dress suit and posing as a paper-hanger, while after dark he plies his nefarious occupations of burglary. His mother is an extremely wealthy and respected resident of Ocean Grove, and when he is conducted to his cell, he asks at once for a nail file and the Police Gazette. He always has a wife in every state of the Union and a fiancé in all the territories, and the newspaper print is matrimonial gallery out of their stock of cuts of the ladies who were cured by only one bottle after having been given up by the 5 doctors, experienced great relief after the first dose. The burglar wore a blue sweater. He was neither a Raffles nor one of the chefs from Hell's Kitchen. The police would have been baffled had they attempted to classify him. They have not yet heard of the respectable, unassuming burglar who is neither above nor below his station. This burglar of the third class began to prowl. He wore no mask, dark lanterns, or gum shoes. He carried a .38 caliber revolver in his pocket, and he chewed peppermint gum thoroughly. He had seen the window left open and had taken the chance. The burglar softly opened the door of the lighted room. The gas was turned low. A man lay in the bed asleep. On the dresser lay many things in confusion: a crumpled roll of bills, a watch key, 3 poker chips, crushed cigars, pink silk hair bow, and an unopened bottle of bromo-seltzer for the bulwark in the morning. The burglar took 3 steps toward the dresser. The man in the bed suddenly uttered a squeaky groan and opened his eyes. His right hand slipped under his pillow, but remained there. "Lay still," said the burglar in conversational tone. Burglars of the third type do not hiss. The citizen in the bed looked at the round end of the burglar's pistol and lay still. "Now hold up hands," commanded the burglar. The citizen had a little pointed brown and gray beard, like that of a painless dentist. He looked solid, esteemed, irritable and disgusted. He sat up in bed and raised his right hand above his head. "Up with the other one," ordered the burglar. "You might be amphibious and shoot with your left." "You can count 2, can't you? Hurry up now." "Can't raise the other one," said the citizen with a contortion. "What's the matter with it?" "Rheumatism in the shoulder." "Inflammatory?" "Was the inflammation has gone down?" The burglar stood for a moment or two, holding his gun on the afflicted one. He glanced at the plunder on the dresser, and then, with a half-embarrassed air, back at the man in the bed. Then he, too, made a sudden grimace. "Don't stand there making faces," snapped the citizen bad-humoredly. "If you're come to burglar me, don't you want to do it?" "'Scuse me," said the burglar with a grin, "but it just shocked me one, too. It's good for you that rheumatism and me happens to be old pals. I got it in my left arm, too. Most anybody but me would have popped you when you wouldn't hoist that left claw of yours." "How long have you had it?" inquired the citizen. 4 years. I guess that ain't all. Once you've got it, it's you for a rheumatic life. That's my judgment. "Ever try rattlesnake oil?" asked the citizen interestedly. "Gallons," said the burglar. "If all the snakes I've used the oil of was strung out in a row, they'd reach 8 times as far as Saturn, and the rattlers could be heard at Valparaiso, Indiana, and back." "Some use Chisholm's pills," remarked the citizen. "No good. Took 'em 5 months. I had some relief the year I tried Franklin's extract, balm, and Gilead poultices, and Pott's pain pulverizer, but I think it was the buckeye I carried in my pocket that done the trick." "Is yours worse in the morning or at night?" asked the citizen. "Night," said the burglar, "just when I'm busiest. Say, take down that arm of yours. I guess you won't. Say, did you ever try Blickerstaff's blood binders?" "I never did." "Does yours come in paroxysms, or is it a steady pain?" The burglar sat down on the foot of the bed and rested his gun on his crossed knees. "It jumps," he said. "It strikes me when I ain't looking for it, and I had to give up second-story work because I got stuck sometimes halfway up. Tell you what, I don't believe the bloomin' doctors know what is good for it." "Same here. I spent $1,000 without getting any relief. Yours swell any?" "Of mornings, and when it's going to rain, great goodness." "Me too," said the citizen. "I can tell when a streak of humidity the size of a tablecloth starts from Florida on its way to New York, and if I pass a theater where there's an East Lynne matinee going on, the moisture starts my left arm jumping like a toothache." "It's undiluted haze," said the burglar. "You're dead right," said the citizen. The burglar looked down at his pistol and thrust it into his pocket with an awkward attempt at ease. "Say, old man," he said, "ever try Opoldelic?" "Slop," said the citizen angrily. "Might as well rub on restaurant butter." "Sure," concurred the burglar. "It's a salve suitable for that little Minnie when the kitty scratches her finger. I'll tell you what. We're up against it. I only find one thing that eases her up. Booze. Say this. Job's off. 'Scuse me. Get on your clothes and let's go out and have some. 'Scusing the liberty, but ouch. There she goes again." "For a week," said the citizen, "I haven't been able to dress myself without help. I'm afraid Thomas is in bed and—" "Climb out," said the burglar. "I'll help you get on your duds." The conventional returned as a tidal wave and flooded the citizen. He stroked his brown and gray beard. "It's very unusual," he began. "Here's your shirt," said the burglar. "Fall out." "I know a man who said Omberry's ointment fixed him in 2 weeks, so he could use both hands in trying his 4-in-hand." As they were going out the door, the citizen turned and started back. "Like to forget my money," he explained. "Laid it on the dresser last night." The burglar caught him by the right sleeve. "Come on," he said bluffly. "I asked you. Leave it alone. I've got the price. Ever try witch hazel and oil of wintergreen?"